Welcome to the UFC Des Moines Prop Drop, where we briefly talk about the entire card and my favorite props on either sides of the matchup, and then we end this segment off with my top 3 favorite prop bets for the card, as well as my one long shot that I will drop for you guys. So let's strap right in. Let's get right into this bad boy. First matchup up, we got Ivana Petrovic going up against Juliana Miller, and a lot of people are very low on Miller because of her 3-3 record, and not to mention her poor performance against Luana Santos last time out. With that said, I do not think Petrovic provides as much danger as Santos did, and I think we'll see improvements from Miller, as she has stated that this is the healthiest she's ever been going into a matchup, and something that I've seen in the past that she's kind of talked about, and also changing up her training and going under the guidance of Rick Little up there at Sick Jitsu in Spokane, Washington. I expect to see an even better version of her to try to really capitalize on the grappling advantage I expect her to have here, and I think that she'll be able to put Petrovic through the ringer, which should lead to Miller winning this fight on the scorecards, which you can currently get at plus 380. A little bit of a long shot here. Miller to win by submission. We know she has a very sneaky 10th Planet BJJ game. You can get Smith to win by submission at plus 700. And then on the Petrovic side, I think if she wins, it mostly looks like her grinding this out, and you can get her to win by decision at plus 115. All right, next up, we got heavyweights with Thomas Petersen taking on Dontel Mays. I was about to say Montel Days. And it might as well be, considering how average this guy's been throughout his UFC career. And I think, unfortunately for him, he's going to be up against it with Petersen, who should be able to put on a pace and pressure that Mays will not be able to keep up with. Now, Petersen, I know he got dropped by Gaziev last time around and got finished by TKO, but for the most part, he normally shows good durability and should be able to take Mays' best shot. This will allow Petersen to really dictate the pace with his improving striking, his pace setting, his output, and even mixing in some takedowns, which was the large part of his success in his regional run. I expect this fight to hit the scorecards, which is currently sitting at minus 125. Petersen to win by decision is plus 120. And then on the flip side for Dontel Mays, you can get him to win by decision at plus 650, which is not a bad line if Mays is able to weasel this one out. But I think it's going to be Petersen that's in the driving seat for the most part of this fight. All right, next up, we got Gaston Bolanos going up against Kwang Lee. I really like me some Bolanos in this spot, but, the props are a little bit tricky here. Now, I think this fight goes to the scorecards, and you can get that at minus 130. Bolanos, I believe he'll be competitive here in the striking realm with Lee, and I think he'll be able to land a little bit better shots. I think he'll be able to stuff most of the grappling coming back his way from Lee, and I think Bolanos ends up winning this fight on the scorecards, which is plus 210. On the flip side for Lee, for him to win, I think it probably comes by decision at plus 280 if he is able to lead a grapple-heavy approach and be successful with it. And long shot for Lee to win by submission is plus 850. If you can catch Bolanos in something, that won't look too bad, as I think he'll be looking to grapple more often than not in this matchup. But I think Bolanos should be able to shut that down, land the more impactful shots on the feet, and win this fight on the scorecards. Like I said, that prop is at plus 210. Next up, we got Jillian Robertson going up against Marina Rodriguez. Clear grappler versus striker matchup here, and I really favored the grappler in most of these matchups, as I expect Robertson to eventually land that takedown, exploiting the poor takedown defense and get-ups from Rodriguez, which will eventually lead to Robertson getting a dominant enough position to sink in that choke that she loves so much, and you can get her to win by submission at plus 290. On the flip side for Rodriguez, if she wins, it probably looks like her thwarting the takedowns of Robertson, battering on the feet and going to a decision, and you can get Rodriguez to win by decision at plus 370. On the another long shot here, Rodriguez to win by TKO at plus 1,000. If she's able to do what she did to Amanda Ribas, where she's able to stuff the takedowns, walk Robertson down, throw a barrage of shots, she might not have to, knock Robertson out clean, but even just putting together a barrage of shots and Robertson just reeling and maybe even getting pushed up against the cage, that could lead to a potential TKO for Rodriguez as well. So plus 1,000 as a knockout is not too bad of a spot. All right, next up, we got Ryan Loder going up against Azamat Bekoev. A grappling fest is what I'm expecting here. And I think a lot of people are overlooking the wrestling chops of Loder. I think Loder can make this very competitive against Bekoev, and I'm kind of surprised that we have Loder all the way up at plus 330 in this fight. I think Loder will do a good enough job in terms of not settling for bad positions. I think he's going to cause Bekoev to fight at a pace that he's not comfortable with, and I think he can really start running away with this in deeper water, especially as Bekoev starts realizing that this guy's a better wrestler than I was originally expecting. You know, if you guys went back and watched the Bekoev versus Budka fight, there's a reason that fight went to a split. It's because Budka put up more of a fight than Bekoev was expecting because he was able to provide some resistance in the grappling realm. That's exactly what I'm expecting here from Loder, and it's going to be tough for either guy to muster up a finish here, but I'm going to lean Loder by decision, which currently sits at plus 650. On the flip side for Bekoev, if he wins, probably comes by decision as well, and that comes in at plus 165. All right, next up, veterans going at it here as we have Miesha Tate taking on Yana Santos. Neither woman a huge finishing threat. Maybe Tate with some submissions, but I ultimately think she'll just grind out Santos over the course of 15 minutes, winning this fight on the scorecards, which you can currently get at plus 160. Same line you can get for Santos pretty much to win by decision here because I expect these women to hit the scorecards, but I do think it's going to be Tate who ends up getting her hand raised there. All right, next up we got Mason Jones going up against Lil Heathen, Jeremy Stevens, both guys returning to the UFC after a little bit of a hiatus in different companies, and I'm expecting the UFC to know what they were doing when they put this matchup together, and I expect it to deliver on the violence, and you can get fight to not go to decisions starting at minus 155. I think it's going to be Jones, showcasing that he is much closer to his prime and eventually putting Stevens to the ringer, winning this fight inside the distance, which you can currently get at minus 110. But I'm going to go a little bit deeper here and think maybe Jones starts to attack a submission style, and I think that is where we've seen Stevens struggle in the past. So you can get Jones to win by submission at plus 380, and then on the flip side for Stevens, you can get him to win by knockout at plus 850. Next up, we got a striker's delight between Sidey and Cameron Smotherman. Although both these guys are like to do their best work in the striking realm, I ultimately think it's going to be Sidey that ends up landing more effective strikes, optically making it look better, and I think that will allow him to win this fight on the scorecards, which I think no matter who ends up winning, this fight will end up hitting the scorecards. So fight to go to decision currently sits at minus 140. Sidey to win by decision sits at plus 195. And Smotherman to win by decision sits at plus 280. All right, this one I'm really excited about, where we got Montel Jackson coming in against Daniel Marcos. Fun fight here. I think a lot of people are thinking that Marcos is a very alive dog here, and I understand it considering, 17-0, usually goes out there and does what he needs to do to get the win, but I think he's going to struggle with the striking and power of Jackson in this fight. And I'm not a guy that likes to take guys that are more reliant on finishes against guys that are better minute winners, because Marcos is the better minute winner in this matchup, but I think the athleticism, speed, and power of Jackson is going to cause Marcos a ton of trouble, and we've seen Marcos get hurt in a few fights, and I think Jackson will be the one to finally crack that chin for the most part. You can get Jackson to win by knockout at plus 400, and I think this happens pretty quickly. I think Jackson round one knockout you can currently get at plus 850. On the flip side for Marcos, it's him usually utilizing his minute winning style, whether it's utilizing his calf kicks or looking for takedowns, and for him to win by decision you can currently get at plus 310. All right, next up, we got another fun striking battle here between Santiago Ponzinibbio taking on Daniel D-Rod Rodriguez. And this is a fight where I don't think either guy will be able to exploit the defensive striking issues in either guy's game, especially with the lack of power that they're throwing at this stage of their careers. I think it's ultimately going to be Ponz Ponzinibbio, who ends up putting together a better body of work, landing his combination striking, mixing it up with his Muay Thai, and really putting the pressure on Rodriguez here. And I think it'll look like Ponzinibbio, who is the one landing more devastating blows, and I think that's going to lead to him winning this fight on the scorecards. The fight to go to decision currently sits at -170. Ponzinibbio to win by decision currently sits at +200, and D-Rod to win by decision currently sits at +210. All right, co-main event now where we got grapplers, and two completely different grapplers though. We got Bo Nickal going up against Reinier de Ridder. Obviously, high-level wrestling going up against high-level BJJ. And I think that this is a perfect matchup for Nickal to showcase that overall game, which will eventually lead to him landing his power and putting de Ridder out. I think this fight finishes under 2.5 rounds, which you can currently get at -130. And I think that Nickal ends up knocking out de Ridder here, which you can get at +180. On the flip side, de Ridder to win by submission currently sits at +750, and this will likely be the most dangerous submission specialist that Nickal has fought, but I think that we'll see him mix it up enough to keep de Ridder on the defensive, and that will eventually lead to Nickal landing that big shot, like I said, and for him to win by knockout +180. All right, that brings us to the main event now, where we got bantamweights going at it as Corey Sandhagen looks to defeat former flyweight champion Davison Figueiredo. I'm thinking that we see Sandhagen put together a solid body of work with his striking, with his grappling, with his output, his volume, his cardio. He might give up a round or two early to Figgy, whether Figgy decides to rely on his striking or even just try to out-grapple Sandhagen. I think we'll see Sandhagen do a good enough job in terms of shutting that down, creating scrambles, putting on a pace that Figgy will not be able to keep up with. This should lead to Sandhagen winning this fight on the scorecards, which currently sits at -150. And then just long shots here, potential long shots. Sandhagen to win in round 4, +1900. Sandhagen to win in round 5, +2400. Absolutely something that could come to fruition if he can set a pace high enough that Figgy is not able to keep up with. On the flip side, Figgy, if he wins, it probably looks like him grinding out at least 3 of the 5 rounds with his power striking and his wrestling and top control, but I don't think that's going to happen. Regardless, you're getting a pretty juicy line if he does get it, which is +850. And then Figgy to win by submission at +1400 might be worth a little bit of a consideration, especially if Sandhagen looks to grapple a little bit more like we saw him do against Rob Font. I know he had an injury going into that matchup, so that might be a little bit of an asterisk there, but we know Figgy has a damn good guillotine choke that he likes to apply, especially when fighters utilize a very desperate takedown game and leave their neck open a little bit more than they should. I think Sandhagen will be privy to that, so I'll be surprised if he gets caught in that, but seeing that prop at +1400 definitely made my eyebrows raise a little bit. All right. Let's get to the top 3 prop bets and long shot that we got for this card. Just quickly recapping last week's, I had the only one of 3 that I hit was the Wellmaker and Simon under 2.5, which was at +140. Brown by decision does not come through as he ends up knocking out Nicholas Dalby, being the first ever person to knock out Dalby. So is what it is there. And then Michel Pereira inside the distance +140. Again, I don't know if there was a horse tranquilizer in the cocktail that Pereira drank before he stepped out against Magomedov, but that was not any type of performance we've ever seen from Pereira in the past. And then the long shot, Smith by submission +1000. Clear that he, the motivation of him fighting close enough to home, the motivation of this being his retirement fight was not enough for him to overcome the power of Ming Yang Zhang, so we have to rip up our long shot there as well. All right, top 3 for this weekend's UFC Des Moines card are going to be Jillian Robertson by submission +290, Mason Jones by submission +380, and then Santiago Ponzinibbio by decision +200. The long shot, we're going to go with my guy, Quick, Montel Jackson, round 1 knockout +850. There you guys go. prop drop for UFC Des Moines. I've already started my research on UFC 315, which is the next UFC card. It's going to be quite a busy weekend of fights next weekend, actually. Not just being capped off by that pay-per-view card going down in Montreal, Canada, but we have PFL MENA starting on Friday. We have LFA 208 also on Friday. And then as an appetizer to the UFC card, there's KSW 106 and then PFL Europe 1. I'll have breakdowns on the YouTube page for LFA and PFL, so stay tuned for that. In terms of PFL MENA and KSW, those breakdowns will only be in written form on the Lock of the Night Patreon page, so make sure you check that bad boy out. All right, that is a wrap for the UFC Des Moines content. Hopefully you guys appreciated it, and hopefully this is the last week where I am not on cam, so hopefully I can get things set up enough for you guys that I feel good enough to at least throw on the cam for you guys next week and make this look a little bit prettier than it has been over the last few weeks. Appreciate the love. Appreciate the support. Drop a comment if you haven't already. Let me know what your favorite props are for this UFC Des Moines card. Yeah, I'll see you guys Sunday for the UFC 315 breakdown. See you guys then. Peace.